said,
We're back.
We're back.
For better or for worse.
He's shaking his head. Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Where'd you get off school?
I get out at 12:05
Okay.
every day but Wednesday.
Okay, great.
Are you recording this for YouTube?
Yes.
Okay, because somebody asked me and I said I thought you were, if they were gonna watch it.
I realized I haven't made the Zoom link yet, so there isn't a Zoom link for people to join this class. You want one?
You might. This is our friend and neighbor Susan, everybody.
Hi, Susan.
I'm friends also.
They drive you.
They drive you here?
No, actually, they didn't have to drive me.
The three of us were here last week, so he said he was gonna do the same thing again today, which is good because I've probably forgotten what all that. We'll relearn it.
They say the third time's a charm.
Yeah, well, maybe you can do it three times, yeah.
Yeah, I thought they canceled it last week.
He did, but they weren't in.
We were confused about it, yeah.
We showed up, he had to do something.
Yeah.
We were
He was here in
traveling
place, he
for-
was, yeah.
Yeah, he was here
in place. and
Yeah.
Realized that there was confusion about that, so.
All I can say is once you're in the hot, it'll happen.
Did you guys come back just because you know all the answers?
We said we would do that.
We're not going.
We're not gonna be those big.
We're not gonna be
You're
those people.
stars, yeah.
Sylvia is wanting to go star.
No, I'm done with stars.
Oh, are you done?
Especially if you'll stand for yourself on that.
Yeah. There's no good way of doing it, to record it unless we're in the sanctuary where I have that other stand podium thing. Oh, all right, you ready? Okay, so once again, if you've read these books, great. It seems very dim in here. If you've read them, great. If you've never read them, I will do my best to make sure you slightly understand what we're talking about. But most of the material, at least right here at the beginning, that we're going to be discussing, I didn't even put on the suggested reading list. And the reason why that is because I am pulling from the Silmarillion. And the Silmarillion is Tolkien's kind of large worldview, world building book. And it reads like a history book or like books of the Bible. If you're a big nerd, you might like to read the Silmarillion. I'm a big nerd. I have read the Silmarillion, but I didn't want to suggest it to people and then be like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to this class because this was unbearable to read. But for Tolkien and the world he creates, come on in.
Hello. Hey.
John.
Hey there.
Tolkien and the world he creates, he doesn't just write a story. He builds a world. And every world that comes into being has a beginning. And the beginning for us in the church, as is in the story, is one being. Part in the Red Sea there, James.
Not disruption at all. No sneaking in the back row, that's for sure.
No, it's just
No, just I would say the only people that distract me here are my children. I can handle anything else. So, we begin with Tolkien's godlike figure. And this being has two names, Eru or Iluvatar. So if I say Eru or Iluvatar, I'm talking about essentially the godlike figure of Middle-earth and his story. Okay? And this is how the world comes into being. These are the opening sentences of the Silmarillion. There was Eru, the one who in Arda is called Iluvatar, and he made the first of the Anwar, the holy ones, that were the offspring of his thought, and they were with him before aught else was made. And he spoke to them, propounding to them themes of music, and they sang before him, and he was glad. But for a long while they sang only each alone, or but few together, while the rest hearkened, for each comprehended only part of the mind of Iluvatar, from which he came. And in the understanding of their brethren, they grew but slowly. Yet ever as they listened, they came to deeper understanding, and they increased in unison and in harmony. So the Anwar are angels, if we're just going to make these one-to-one comparisons. So in kind of the coming of creation in Tolkien's myth, we have Iluvatar, the god who makes the angels, and they are born of his thought. So this kind of connects with the idea of we are made in God's image, not a physical image, but like the soul self part of us is what is made in the image of the divine. But you have these angelic beings who begin singing their own songs, and it brings the god delight, but they're not in harmony or in unison. And this is something we talked a lot about in our first class, and we're going to talk more. The idea of it being a song. So creation comes into being in Tolkien's myth by song. Very similar to God saying, "Let there be light." In Tolkien's creation, they sing creation into being. And as they exist and as they sing, they come closer and closer into harmony. And this is when life begins, when the world begins, when creation begins, when these beings are working in concert together. It's not an accident. This has all happened. It's all purposeful. And these beings are created, these first ones, they're 6, and they're kind of made to act together. They're almost like couples, so to speak, but they work in concert with each other, as well as within the larger whole as this creation is coming into being. This tells us, I think, something innately Christian, Catholic, Lutheran, whatever. But the purpose of creation is for creation to exist and live in unison, in harmony, in right relationship. All right? When a band, when an orchestra, when a choir, when duet, whatever, when people are singing together, it sounds beautiful. As long as the people can sing, I guess. I mean, you could have bad people singing together, but chances are 2 bad singers aren't singing together no matter what you do. But this is the idea. We are made to share within the music. We are created that our voices may join. I mean, this is very Revelation type imagery, the idea of us joining the eternal worshiping masses in the court of heaven. So we're made, and these are very important for Tolkien, we're made for relationship, and we're made to contribute to the song of creation. And I would say this is a very Christian understanding. We were made to be in relationship with each other, made to be in relationship with God. And outside of that, being that we were made in his image, we too are kind of called to create our own art, to create our own things, to create our own being. And this was the intent. This is the purpose of Iluvatar, of that God's creation. It is about communion. But in order to understand Lord of the Rings, we have to understand where evil comes from, because the tales of Middle-earth are all about good versus evil. Now there was one, and this is going to sound very similar, but there was one of the Anwar who was the mightiest of the group, and his name at the beginning is Melkor. And I will continue to read from the Silmarillion. But as the song progressed, it came into the heart of Melkor to interweave matters of his own imagining that were not in accord with the theme of Iluvatar, for he sought therein to increase the power and the glory of the part assigned to himself. To Melkor, among the Anwar, he had been given the greatest gifts of power and knowledge, and he had a share in all the gifts of his brethren. He had gone often alone into the void places, seeking the imperishable fire. The imperishable fire is kind of the energy, the essence, the being of the divine God in Middle-earth. But what is it? So Melkor will be the comparable Satan. He will be the first of the fallen. In that little piece I read, where does he start to break away? What is he interested in doing? He wanted to do his own thing. Does that in and of itself necessarily seem evil?
Not in the beginning.
Not in the beginning.
Never does.
Never does. What else?
We're off by ourselves a lot.
Yeah, so he does, and he will continue to do a lot of things on his own. He is not nearly as interested in working in the collective or with others. We're going to talk about this a little bit more, but this idea of how we see and understand relationships. Melkor does not view relationships in the way I think God intends. Melkor is always about having use of or having control of, but never sharing a relationship, if that makes any sense. I'll continue, but being alone, he had begun to conceive thoughts of his own, unlike those of his brethren. Some of these thoughts he now wove into his music, and straightway discord arose about him, and many that sang nigh him grew despondent. Then the discord of Melkor spread even wider and wider. But Iluvatar sat and hearkened until it seemed that about his throne there was a raging storm as of dark waters. So Melkor increasingly is singing his own song, weaving his own creation and his own ideas into the song. And what begins to happen?
Chaos.
Chaos.
People
Discord.
separate from.
Yeah. How else?
Well, I heard that the people were no longer joyful, they were despondent.
Yeah, it was no longer a joyful, happy, harmonious song, but it was discordant. It was broken. There was something wrong. Now, when we actually sit down, and this is something we'll talk about, and we can talk about it now. I'm not going to go by the way we did and how we ended up where we ended up. But one of the interesting things we talked about in the soft run of this class last week is, why does it feel like evil is so noticeable?
Because good exists.
Because good exists.
Good is the natural way. Good is the natural way.
Okay, yeah.
And it's so different.
It's so different.
Sometimes it's appealing.
Okay, sometimes it's appealing. I like
Least resistance.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely true. When you sit down and you hear a group play music, if they're all in harmony, you hear what they're playing together, the music they're making together. But what if someone in there is doing their own thing?
It stands out.
It stands out. it becomes the thing you notice. The evil thing or the thing that is wrong about what is happening in front of your eyes becomes the thing that you focus on, the thing you narrow in on. And that's something that we're going to talk about throughout the course of all of this is why does it always feel like evil is winning? And I feel like considering when Tolkien lived, it makes perfect sense. He served in World War I. He was writing these books as World War II was leading up and happening. And this had a profound impact on everyone in Europe. But it had a profound effect on him. So we kind of get to this place where creation is made, people are supposed to be in community, harmoniously singing their own songs as part of the greater whole.
Tolkien also didn't seem to be a fan of the Industrial Revolution.
Oh no, well, we're going to talk about evil, and a lot of that is with machinery. You know, everything that's evil in Middle Earth is not green, but it's fire and billowing smoke and gears and engines. And
One other thing is that there were 6 and then there were 5. Anything in the numerology symbolic of that? Or?
I mean, I think he takes biblical numerology quite a bit. 11 is not a number as frequently used. But kind of taking away, Adam, God saw that Adam was alone, so he created Eve. Jesus says, when how many are gathered, there I am also.
2.
2 or 3 are gathered, there I am also. Faithfulness is a communal practice. I think one of the great problems we have today is this idea of, you know, faith is about my personal relationship with God, when in reality, faith is much more about what we do as we are gathered together, who we are together. And this is something this is greatly influenced by Tolkien's devout Catholic upbringing. What do you think Tolkien sees as the worst sin one can commit? Of the 7 deadly? Pride. Because what does pride inevitably end up doing?
You're going to put yourself in a
Separate you.
It separates you.
You put yourself first.
You put yourself first.
least other deadly sins.
Yep. I think you don't need people. If you have that kind of pride, you don't feel like you need other people.
Also kind of puts you in an adversarial position. Or can.
With everything.
If people don't see you the way you see yourself, with any of those things. But Melkor is clearly a very prideful individual. And he takes the view that Friedrich Nietzsche lifted up, which if there were a God, who could not bear to be God? Which I think is a very interesting point of connection. Because if you remember, if you took my 7 Deadly Sins class, I think the first sin is the fear of Adam and Eve that they had to rely, the realization that they now had to rely on God, that they were reliant on God. And that if they were to eat of the fruit, they would be like God, therefore would not have to rely on God. And I think Melkor from the get-go is the one being, the one creature who wants to be God. Doesn't want to be amidst his brethren, doesn't want to be just one of the brothers and sisters, wants to be his own God. So he sets about, his entire purpose is to claim the power of the flame imperishable. He wants to be a Luvatar. He wants to create. He wants to do things his own way. He doesn't want to participate with the group. It's almost like toddlers.
Funny to go back to.
One of the things that I find so interesting about evil in Tolkien's Middle Earth, especially the most evil of creatures, is they're always good at one thing. Does anybody know? Anybody guess? The biggest baddies share in common. They're all very good at this one thing.
Gathering attention.
Well, they call attention to themselves quite easily.
Control of others.
They're very good at lying.
Oh, yeah.
They're very good at deceit. In fact, their greatest weapon is kind of their ability to lie. When Melkor loses a bunch, and he always gets out of it, chiefly by lying and saying, "Oh, I didn't mean to. I'll be good. I promise. Just let me go." But the reason why his brothers and sisters keep doing this is because they are still good. They don't understand. It's almost as if they're naive, like children. Like they don't comprehend the idea that you would say something that wasn't true. This is why Melkor always is able to kind of trick his brothers and sisters, or those who are kind of on his level, because he's intentionally being deceitful, and they don't understand that. They don't get it. It's almost as if they're naive to how evil works because they're good. So he goes about ensuring through lies, through deceit, that no one will know what his true aims are. So he's seen as, in the beginning, as kind of just the inquisitive one. Maybe the one who will step off the path every now and then, may have to explain himself. But he's doing his best to deceive everyone around him so they won't know exactly what his end game is. And I think that's true evil, or that's competent evil, I would say. Its ability to hide its aims, to maybe even cloak them in being for good. Because as we go through this, we're going to see that a lot of people end up falling out with the others because they want to do good by evil means, or by stepping off the path of what is good. So as we'll sin our way to salvation, almost type of thing, or this is a power we can't control, but we're going to use it when we're going to wield it anyways. So Melkor wants to be his own god. He's very good at lying. He's not reliant on the community to which he's a part at all. And this creates this immense dissonance. So bad, so terrible, in fact, that the others were overwhelmed. But as this creation's coming into being, we have the first two races of Middle Earth, and that is the elves and men. Now, elves are like somewhere between humanity and the divine angels, like a lower tier of angels that have these kind of physical forms. Melkor is very much like the Miltonian Satan from Paradise Lost. He is very jealous of these two races. And in some ways, he's jealous because they have a freedom he himself does not possess. But because he is jealous of them, he seeks to bring them under his own control, seeks to bring them under his own mastery. And this kind of sets up, I would say, the idea of good relationship versus evil relationship. Melkor is not interested in being in any type of relationship with anyone else that isn't I'm the Lord superior and you're something else below me. That is not real and true relationship, but that is the only relationship that this being Melkor desires to have. We talked about in one of those classes, I can't remember which one of our Sunday school classes, but the idea of C.S. Lewis, that to love at all is to be vulnerable. That idea of being in relationship, you're in some ways handing power over to that person to hurt you, to wound you. And that if we are wounded or we aren't willing to be vulnerable or to put us in that place where we could be harmed, that can corrupt every other type of relationship we see and that exists out in the world. That idea of when we talked about the 7 deadly sins of lust, you weren't viewing or seeing the person as a person. You were seeing them as a means of satisfying a need or a desire. So that's the only way Melkor can look out into this creation and see just people he can use, stepping stones, but they are all things he needs to climb to the top and to get to the top. I'll read here just this last one and we'll do our deep dive into the nature of evil. But Melkor is currently bringing evil, like as its offshoot, it's coming into being. From splendor, Melkor fell through arrogance to contempt for all things except for himself, a spirit wasteful and pitiless. Understanding, he turned subtly and perverting to his own will all that he would use until he became a liar without shame. He began with the desire of light, but when he could not possess it for himself alone, he descended through fire and wrath into a great burning down into the darkness. And darkness he used most in his evil works upon Arda, which is Middle Earth, the continent, or the world itself, and filled it with fear for all living things. So that is, straight out of Paradise Lost, this idea of him being cast, Satan being cast out of heaven and plunging into the depths of hell. Of course, in this story, Iluvatar does not throw Melkor, the Satan of Tolkien's world. What drives Melkor to that place?
He has no control, no one controls him there.
He does it to himself. These are the consequences of his pursuit, is that he drives himself deeper and deeper, farther and farther away from God. And I would say that's a very good theological understanding of what sin can be. Continues to drive us further and further away from the light. But I thought that last sentence I read, and darkness he used most in his evil works, and filled it with fear for all living things. I would say the greatest weapon one can wield over other people is fear. That is the greatest tool. I think to get people to do what you want is to channel that and use it to your own aims. And that's what Melkor is going to do. But when he is down in that pit of darkness and shadow and fire, he forged himself a crown of iron and gave himself the title King of the World. And I think that very much kind of connects with Mark's idea of the powers of this age, one of the things we talked about in that Mark class. The idea of it being the great thing in opposition to God, Iluvatar, the power of the age, the great Satan, the king of the world. But when defining evil, Tolkien is careful to define the limits of even the scariest and most powerful that evil can offer up. Because Melkor rejects Iluvatar's goodness, his inequity has no real substance, no true right to exist, no proper being. And I love that Tolkien is kind of putting forth this understanding, this belief that evil has no real substance, that it does not have a right to exist at all, and that it doesn't really have a proper being. It comes into being through us. What do you make of that? This idea that evil has no real substance and no right to exist.
Like a foundation, it doesn't have a foundation
Okay,
in God. It stands alone. Kind of just out.
okay, yeah,
Shaky ground.
yeah. He constantly refers to evil as shadow. And what does shadow need to exist?
The light.
The light. Does the light need shadow? No, but the shadow needs light. I think this is important as we talk about this class, and I think just in general in our lives, in the modern world, in our modern context, to be mindful of this idea that evil is a branch off of good that moves further and further away from it. But evil in God's creation has no right to exist and no real substance. And I think some of the great courage of the characters in his stories are able to kind of cling to that hope that the light, the goodness, holds more power even in the face of this dark and terrible shadow. But anyways, anybody else have anything? I think we talked quite a lot about that section in our class. Well, when we did this class last week. So Tolkien gets this from from Saint Augustine, who says that evil is privatio boni, which is it is the absence of good. So evil is the absence of good. And one of the things Tolkien, Augustine, Luther, and many others want us to understand is that we're never meant to take evil with the same seriousness that we accord good. All right, we are never to afford it that same seriousness that we do to good. Tolkien kind of lifts this up as the only way that evil can triumph is the belief that evil can truly triumph. That's the only way. Because ultimately, like we said, it is merely a shadow of the light and the goodness and the intent of creation. We do not, as Lutherans, as most Christians, we do not credit true being to the devil, but to God alone. God is the one who creates all beings. And that evil in some way exists because God allows it to exist. This is like the idea of God and Satan going head to head. That's not really much of a competition. God, in the book of Revelation, God never steps off the throne to come handle the scary dragon, spiraling forward. He lets Michael deal with that. Evil has no chance against goodness. And I think this is kind of a hopeful, powerful reminder for us as we go out, as we watch the news, whatever it is we do, as we encounter, see, and experience evil, to kind of remember this isn't the intent of creation, that it has no true right to exist. I think that's kind of this really powerful understanding that evil has no right to exist. His favorite word for evil is marring. It's his favorite metaphor. It's the one he uses most. What does marring mean? M-A-R-R-I-N-G.
More like marking, scarring.
Yep, marking, scarring. Why would he use that in describing evil?
Is it something physical, you can see it.
Okay, yeah.
If something's scarred or something that has a visual.
Which means it's kind of changing its form.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good.
So evil cannot create for its own. Only good can do that. So Melkor's problem is that he wants to be able to create his own world, his own beings, but he cannot do that because he does not possess the flame imperishable, the thing that gives light and life and all of those things. So because he can't create, he does what instead? He warps, he
Yeah.
twists, he
Yeah.
mars,
He
he
reinvents-
corrupts.
he
He
reinvents.
takes the good creation and he bends it and breaks it and scars it to his will and for his uses and for his aims. So evil has the power in that it can attempt to kind of corrupt the light or break the light or warp the light. But it cannot create of its own. And this, I think, kind of sets up this idea that evil is a parasite of good. Melkor is a parasite off his creator. This idea, evil can only manufacture parodies and counterfeits. Evil can only manufacture parodies and counterfeits. So I've continued, I don't remember what the title was, but I've gotten really interested in like people's philosophy about AI. So what it actually is, besides, it's just a computer program algorithm. But what, listening to people who are actually arguing, what is intelligence? Now that we have systems like this, what does it mean to be intelligent? And it's every time I kind of go into these arguments that some people are making that this is real intelligent life, all of a sudden it feels like what they're talking about is actually a parody or a counterfeit of what we are. And I think that's kind of the thing I love about Tolkien, is that he believed we were all creators, each in our own way. We all have been, that part of what being made in the image of God means is that we ourselves are part of what is creating in this world, creating in this life, that we are part of God's ongoing, continuing creation. And he calls this sub-creation. So it's not the original. We don't do it of our own. We derive it from our creator. So we're sub-creators. But what drives, we talk about ingenuity and, America loves to talk about how great it is at inventing things all the time. But what is it, do you think, that does drive us to kind of create as a species, as individuals?
Curiosity.
Okay, I think there is that part.
There's a
part.
survival component to it.
Yeah.
It's need,
It feels good, it's rewarding to create.
Okay, yeah, it's rewarding.
To answer a question, there was no solution.
Okay,
There's some pride in there.
yeah. Yeah, finding that medium between being proud of it and taking pride in self in an unhealthy way. What else?
Giving pleasure to others in some way.
Where do you say it goes wrong then? Okay, yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, I would say what we can create can give us power over other people.
It becomes, what have I done for myself versus what can I do for others?
Yeah. I mean, with stuff like this, I have, what are Oppenheimer? And then, what are they thinking about as they go about building this? What goodness is going to come of this? The ability to destroy cities in an instant. I think we do create for all the right reasons that our creator gave us that ability. But I also think, given the opportunity and the reasoning, maybe the justification, we're willing to warp and create and use our gifts that are supposed to be for good, for ill, for wrong. And Melkor and all evil, as you said, this kind of industrialization of the world, they will all be using that ability to create for their own aims of domination and of power. And the thing that I've gotten from reading our book, or this philosophical writings on AI, is I truly believe that as a tool, it can do humanity immense good, but it will not be used for our benefit. Almost nothing created with this type of power to affect change is ever used to our benefit. And it will kind of instead have a power by those who wield it, and they will hold it over us. So I think this is just another example of the parodies, the counterfeit things we create are ultimately just toys, some of them innocent, some of them cruel, and some of them terrifying. So it begins to make Melkor feel more relatable, I think, as this creator. But he's defeated as he tries to rise up. And as I said, Tolkien says it is his silken language that allows him to persuade the compassionate Manwë. So Manwë would be like Saint Michael, like that, the best of the archangels or whatever. But he is able to persuade Manwë to pardon and unchain him. And this, once again, as we go through these stories, this guilelessness, or the guilelessness of the innocent, the naivete of the innocent, is constantly something taken advantage of by evil. And Tolkien wrote, Manwë was free from evil and could not comprehend it. So he didn't even know what was happening to him. And that is kind of what we see happen. You can see that happen to your children, to kids, before they're early, they don't understand why someone would lie to them. They don't know why that is something that would happen. You see that corruption, begin to break in, begin to happen around them. And at the beginning, they definitely don't understand it. I can still get Charlie with the ball trick, where I act like I throw it and put it behind my back. Just like the dog, he wanders all around the house looking for it. It's very easy for the good to be misled by the evil. And this, I think, connects with Jesus' words, that is, he sends out the disciples. He tells them to be as innocent as doves and as sly or as cunning as what? Serpents. What do you think Jesus is telling his disciples? What do you think he's trying to get them to understand there?
They could be led down the wrong way.
Yeah.
They're gonna be dealing with original sin. People are going to do things against it. Just because they don't like what they're saying, for whatever reason. Doesn't fit their view of the world, or how you brought up.
I think it's my standard Sunday school answer, not to dust off your sandals and move on.
Yeah. Let's say this is Jesus commissioning us. What is Jesus saying to each and every one of us? Be as innocent as doves and as sly or as cunning as serpents.
Beware of evil.
Beware of evil. Don't be Manwë. But what does that mean? What does that look like?
Does it mean be strong and fight the evil off, or is it have an eye for it and don't let it affect you? I'm struggling with that.
It's kind of discern. It's more like a discernment.
Yeah, I would say there's definitely a discernment that goes in with that, kind of judging the intentions almost of someone, maybe.
Be trusting but not stupid.
Be trusting but not stupid, which feels like it's impossible. You either have to be foolish to trust or not. I think Jesus displays it perfectly, as Jesus does. He does these things better than we could. But when the devil's tempting him in the wilderness, he's using scripture perfectly, flawlessly But Jesus knows the cunning behind the devil, that he's trying to trap him, trying to trip him up. Jesus is wise to this. He knows what's happening. So I think what Jesus is saying here is don't be misled or don't be deceived. And I think this evil and this deceit, as the devil displays in the Gospels when he tempts Jesus, is that it can appear to be innocent. That evil can do a very good job of putting on the sheep's clothing, so to speak, or appearing to be innocent. That there is a necessary discernment process about how to go about doing these things. It takes some patience to seek the wisdom of God or whatever it is. But yeah, I think it's important I think those words are important to consider as we kind of go out in the world, as we discern the decisions that we ourselves are going to make. Those things we ourselves will experience. Now we are officially getting to a point where we pass where we left off last time. So the worst legacy of, so Melkor's name is now changed to Morgoth. All right, so Melkor, Morgoth, same person. But his worst and most devastating seduction is his rallying to his cause of what are the Maiar. And the Maiar are a step down from Melkor's station, but a step above elves. So if you've ever seen like an angelic hierarchy made up by the Catholics, you've got the seraphim, the cherubim, the thrones, the powers, the dominions. I mean, there's 9 of them. But the Maiar are kind of that spot between the spiritual angelic, who could still take human form and do, but more spiritual than the elves, like more. So we actually know there are characters in the books who are Maiar. Do you guys know any of them by any chance? So Sauron is a Maiar. Gandalf is a Maiar. Saruman is a Maiar. The Balrog in the first movie, it stands on the other side of the bridge from Gandalf. That was a Maiar. And Radagast, the brown wizard in The Hobbit, is also a Maiar. So these are beings of immense power who are closer to being a mortal human than the Annuar, to what Melkor or Morgoth was. But these are characters that we begin to interact with. And these are all the beings that he rallies to his cause are kind of like those angels that chose to follow Satan in Milton's Paradise Lost. So these are the ones who kind of choose to be corrupted. And does anyone know who is the most evil and the most devious and the best of Morgoth's recruits? Oh, come on, Sauron.
Yeah.
Sauron becomes his chief lieutenant, his go-to kind of guy, his lead general. So Sauron was made in kind of that same goodness, basking in that presence, but is seduced by this opportunity.
Well, they always talk, Gandalf, when they talk about the order, so they were all part of an original order.
Yeah.
As the Maiar, right?
Yep. They were all sent to Middle Earth kind of as these things are unfolding to kind of be shepherds and guides.
Does it say how many total there are?
I think there's 9.
2 blues.
Oh, maybe you're right. 2.
5. Ragnar, Gandalf, Sauron, 2 blues and the
That's right. You're right. 5. Good job. Good job, nerd. But so Tolkien wrote that this evil one rose like a shadow of Morgoth and a ghost of his malice and walked behind him on the same ruinous path down into the void. This is the doctrine of original sin. One falls and the others follow type thing. That evil is almost this kind of generational thing passed down just to the next group when the first group is gone. This is where we might contend with Catholics a little bit about, what it means to be righteous, the difference between works righteousness and justification by grace through faith. But the one thing that I think Catholics and Lutherans will agree on is this idea that we almost inherit sin from the previous generation, that we're born into this corrupt world, and we have no choice almost but to continue down that kind of broken path. But Sauron is like the little puppy following behind Morgoth, following behind Melkor. And after his defeat the first time, what do you think Sauron did? I'm sorry. I'll repent of my evils, and I promise I will not allow my pride to consume me. As if they hadn't learned of Melkor and Morgoth's willingness to lie and to deceive. There is always that deceit offered, that lie to be told, to be set free and liberated once again. And it is this point, after Sauron has been released again, that he devises a new plan to subjugate the free peoples of Middle-earth. And what plan is that?
The rings of power.
3 rings for the elven kings under the sky, 7 for the dwarf lords in their halls of stone, 9 for mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the dark lord on his throne, in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie, 1 ring to rule them all, 1 ring to find them, 1 ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them. It's a pretty sinister plan right there.
Look at this pretty ring.
Far from being evil, the rings actually enable their wearers to accomplish immense good. Right? So taking what we've kind of discussed about Tolkien's understanding of the nature of evil and how he uses that in the midst of Middle-earth, what are we to make of this idea that the rings that are given to these individuals enable them to do great good?
That you have to, it's a little tricky. You could do good, but evil can come, evil too.
Yeah.
The original intent was to do good with them.
Yeah, the original intent was to be good.
But then it got corrupted.
But the power corrupts.
Yeah.
Yes.
Corrupts. What else?
Is that the trick, to have them so that they do good, so people will embrace them and not realize it's a trap?
Yeah, so let's see.
Are they going full circle?
I think the one thing that the rings do is they play into the best of parts of you. I think that's what, especially the rings of men, plays into what's best about you. It doesn't corrupt you where you're most vulnerable. It finds the very best virtue in you, and it is there that it seeks to corrupt.
The number of rings that were given to each group, most of the dwarves got 7. Does that mean they're a more virtuous group than the others?
Well, no, I mean, I know the elves in their receiving, their rings are the most beautiful. And they're kind of the only ones that aren't really don't fall as a result of having them. And it is when Sauron gives the rings away, he ultimately knows men will be the ones he can control when they're used.
I remember there are 7 dwarven families.
Yeah.
And we 7 rings, each for the kings of the various dwarves.
Kind of representing the countries in this
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Tribes,
The nations, tribes.
Okay.
you can corrupt all the tribes.
Yeah.
For years.
So in this case, you're right.
And for them, it just gave them, more gold and just made them more greedy. It gave them more to feed their greed.
Something like that.
So I would say, especially when it comes to humanity, that the rings are a tool and can enable good intentions to have good outcomes. But what Tolkien really wanted to remind his readers, or just speak to the nature of man, is that power does ultimately do one thing. And absolute power corrupts, or power corrupts absolutely. The problem for Sauron is his belief and trust in himself and the ring that he made. He puts all of his trust in this tool. He trusts it above anything else. And in some ways, it corrupts him in much the same way that it corrupts the 9 rings of men, or the way the one ring corrupts Gollum and Frodo or Isildur when he gets it. It's this idea that if I possess this, I will have everything I want, have everything I need. And I think insatiable hunger, when that starts, it can never, ever be filled. You'll never have that peace. But Sauron pours so much of himself. In some ways, we talk about whatever your heart clings to and confides in, that is truly your God. This is literally what Sauron is doing. He's making the ring his God, so to speak. But then he loses. You always, if you watch the movies, you see how Sauron is defeated. And Isildur takes the ring, and they go to Mount Doom, and there he has this chance to destroy the ring, and in some ways destroy evil, almost. But Isildur doesn't. And I actually like him, but he calls it his weregild. Do you know what that is? Mm-hmm. So a weregild was man price or man payment. So it's something in like the Middle Ages, before the Middle Ages. If you killed someone, you might have to pay the price for what that person's life was worth. So, a slave might only be a couple pieces of silver, but if you killed royalty, it'd be gold on gold type of thing. So it was the price for his father having been killed. He was going to keep the ring instead of casting it into the fire. And the ring betrays him, and he's ambushed by orcs. But got 3 or 4 minutes. So yeah, all right. I just want to finish this up. I don't want to start the next part. What the ring does to who inevitably, or who end up finding it. So the creature of Gollum. How does he come to be by that ring? What does he do to get it?
He kills someone.
Yeah, relative, I think, his brother or his
cousin,
something, friend, somebody he's close to. But you can kind of compare this to Cain and Abel type, almost this idea of killing of the brother after the sin of Adam and Eve type thing. But he takes the ring, and he becomes a creature of appetite almost. So in the books, and you even hear it in the movies, he's always doing this kind of repetitive swallowing, gurgling type thing. he goes, like, it's like he's choking on something, but he's always kind of making this noise, that he's always trying to satiate his appetite. And one of the things that Tolkien does, which I've always thought was kind of cool, is that our personalities, like the personalities of these characters, kind of haven't come out in the quality of their acts and their little descriptions of who they are as a character. So in some ways, outward behavior manifests the inward convictions, whether for good or for ill. And this kind of brings to mind for me Luke chapter 6. The good man out of the good treasure of his heart produces good, and the evil man out of his evil treasure produces evil. For out of the abundance of the heart, his mouth speaks. So kind of, if you're broken, corrupt, evil within, what is going to come out is broken, corrupt, and evil. But what the ring does to Gollum and to Frodo is it seeks to drive them more and more into isolation. Why?
That's what evil is.
So we can defeat
That's what
them.
this
Power.
Overtake them.
The power of the people.
He's a brotherhood, and then all of a sudden tries to break it down.
Yeah. Why? Why does Gollum basically go hide? Why is Frodo get increasingly frustrated with
So
Sam?
no one will take the ring.
That's it. So no one will take what is theirs. And we see like what that isolation does to a being. Gollum essentially goes crazy. He's always talking to himself. He refers to the ring as my precious because it is his most prized possession that he creates. Once again, evil has created this kind of pseudo community. It's almost the way people now talk to AI as if it's a real person. It's like a fake community, a fake sense of relationship. But in their fear of losing this thing that is killing them, it drives them further and further into this isolation. And that is one of the things that Tolkien really lifts up is evil can never ultimately win because to like lift up what Jesus said, a house divided cannot stand when we're referencing Satan and the devil, that people bound together for evil intent will always inevitably do what?
Break apart.
Self-destruct.
It was self-destruct.
Someone will try to run the whole thing and drive people with egos and power.
So one of the things about goodness is that you would, as part of the good natural order God intended, you would think everyone would be moving towards the same end. Like, evil usually always has its own ends in mind that are different from the good. And it's safe to assume that if one evil intention is different from the good, it's also going to be different from the other evils. To be part of the intention for the end of the goodness kind of leaves us all in the same boat, rowing in the same direction. But when evil starts to break off, it will inevitably always tear each other down. There will never be that peace. And this is kind of the idea that death begets death, sin begets sin, that these things can never coexist together. It is only in goodness that this community itself can actually exist. The community bound in evil will always naturally decay. All right, so that's where we're going to end this class. We have officially made it through the creation and the kind of origins of evil. But again, in the next class, the next Tuesday, we're going to talk about how Tolkien writes the power of evil. So we're going to talk about their idea of magic. And we're going to talk about industrialization and kind of what these things do to the world around us. But how evil magic works compared to how good forces work. Because once again, one seems more obvious. The evil power is quick and it happens instantly. The good is almost that slow plodding that can't be stopped. And we're going to talk about theologically. I'm really excited for this next class. We're going to talk about what that means theologically for us, what it means to be patient, patience as a virtue versus impatience, which is a vice. Because Tolkien would hate our world today. I have no doubt that he was, instant gratification, that for him, and that was in the 1930s. Can you imagine what he would think about instant gratification today? Well, people are mad if they don't get their food in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
But I think this one, there's some really good points of connection theologically to scripture, and then I think to our modern world. So, all right.
All right.
Quick question, who's his relationship with his mother, you know?